Hi guys, my name's Phoebe. I'm the gym manager and one of the personal trainers at Sandown Sports, and I'm joined today by Dave, who will introduce himself in just a sec, and we are going to chat to you all about running.
Hi guys, I'm Dave. I'm a physio at Body Mechanics. I did a degree in sports science. I then converted it to physiotherapy. I love the body, everything about the body. I have a special interest in all sports, but running is always a good one to focus on at this time.
All right, so we wanted to kind of get in initially for those of you who, whilst we've been in lockdown, you might have taken up running and you might have noticed that you've had some kind of niggles or some problems, or you're just not really sure how to get started. And so I wanted to sort of get in initially with why it's really important to gradually progress yourself into your running and not to just think, oh, well, I saw my friend Becky did a 10K run the other day, I'm going to give it a go, having been, you know, sedentary at home, not really exercising for maybe the last 5 years. And I kind of wanted to use a bit of like a gym and a weights analogy for this, to kind of explain it in an easier way for you. So if you're brand new to a gym and you walked into that gym on day one and you saw a barbell loaded up on the floor with 100 kilograms of weight on it, now you probably wouldn't be stupid and go and try and pick that weight up straight away, okay? Because if you were to try that, you tried to pick that weight up off the floor, one of two things would probably happen. Either number one, you might injure yourself, you might pull a muscle, you might strain your back, or number two, simply just nothing would happen because the weight is too heavy, you wouldn't be able to lift it, and the barbell probably wouldn't move off the floor. Okay, and so when it comes to running, it is pretty much the same principle. So if you go out there and try and complete a 10-kilometer run on your first ever time running, chances are A, you won't be able to complete it, B, you might get some niggles or some injuries that your body's just not used to sort of performing the running movement, and so it's not kind of ready for that amount of exercise. And it might just leave you feeling really disheartened actually and thinking, actually, that run didn't go so well, I didn't really manage it, I don't want to go back and do it again. So taking it back to that 100 kg sort of barbell that you have loaded up on the floor, if after attempting to pick it up, you were still determined to get to that 100 kilos, where would you start? Simple. You would unrack all the weights, you take all the weights off, and you take it down to just that empty bar. That empty bar you could probably manage to pick up off the floor, maybe 15 or 20 kilograms worth. And it's the same with the running. So instead of trying to push yourself straight away into that 10-kilometer run or that 100 kilos off the floor, let's dial it back. Start with it nice and slow, nice short distances, perhaps even just 1 kilometer to start with, perhaps 2, and then you can gradually build up that distance or build up that weight if you were in a gym, and that will kind of leave you feeling far more satisfied whether you increase your distance by half a kilometer every week, whether it's 1 kilometer a week, whatever you're doing. It will kind of, you know, give you that push that you need, and it will let you gradually increase and gradually progress over a suitable amount of time. And as I mentioned, if you do try and push kind of too quickly or too far too soon, then you might, you know, have a few faults and things that you wouldn't have noticed before, or that you'll start to pick up some aches, pains and niggles. And some of those kind of typical faults and things is what Dave is going to chat to you about now.
Well, thanks, Phoebe. I think a great analogy, because from fundamentally what I'm going to be talking about is form. So when you go to the gym, you're going to lift up a big barbell. The other thing you have to think about is actually how am I going to do it? So particularly at the moment when I'm going out and lockdown, I'm seeing more and more people running, and I think that's fantastic, but there are several common faults that I'll often see, and I'll be running behind someone thinking, oh, it would be good to give you a bit of advice, give you a bit of a nudge in the right direction. First one is seeing people running along when one leg is significantly turned out compared to the other. So the pattern is that one leg's landing straight and the other leg is coming around ever so slightly and the foot is turning outwards. There can be multiple reasons why the foot turns outwards. There can be problems at the back, at the hip, at the foot itself. But if you are running and you see yourself doing that pattern, just make a note of it, because it's important to know which leg was turning out. The second thing that I tend to see is asymmetrical arm swing. People don't really think about their arms when they run. They just sort of get out there and, yeah, I've got my pods plugged in, I've got my music, and off we go. When I'm running and I see someone and the arm swing is different, one is going across the body, one's going straight, one's going back further than the other one, then what it's showing me is that one side is working differently to the other. Asymmetry in running, just like the leg being turned out, is what kills the runner. It's what we tend to see as the fault that's occurring over a period of time, that we need to strip it back to basics and get it symmetrical. So talking of asymmetry, the third point I always see is asymmetrical weight bearing. The ideal way to pick this up is to gait analyze on the treadmill, but you can still hear it and see it out on the street as well. When you've got one side that thumps down, the other side that's coming down lighter, you are asymmetrically loading the system. and it doesn't have to marry up to the other faults. Some people will load more heavily on a side that's painful. Some people will load less heavily on a side that's painful. The asymmetries that are showing up are just signs that you need to have a look at what you're doing it, how you're doing it, and test what sort of movement you have available in order to keep yourself running. Because running is based around how well the body can move, how well it can keep on going, just like lifting in a gym. If you can't squat all the way down to pick up your barbell, you're going to have to work on the squat before you even think about the barbell. So from running, if you can't have the legs moving into lunges repeatedly, if you can't have the legs standing on one leg and balancing repeatedly, you're probably going to see 1, 2, if not all 3 of the faults that I've just pointed out. So I'm going to hand back to Phoebe, who's going to talk about that.
So obviously, if you are just starting out running, you might be running once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. And as I have already mentioned, it's really, really important to slowly and gradually progress your runs. Now, I want to dive into that a bit deeper, because it's all well and good me sitting here and saying, gradually progress your runs, start with 1 kilometre, then 2, then 3. But how do you actually, you know, slow and steadily increase that? And what other things can you throw in there? Because let's face it, just running as far as you can 3 times a week is going to probably wreak havoc on your body and also get quite boring and repetitive. So there's kind of 3 different training protocols, if you like, that I'm going to go through today, and these are relevant whether you are a complete beginner or whether you're training to be the next Mo Farah. These are kind of suitable for everyone. So the main kind of thing that you need to work on mixing up and changing around is going to be, 1, the intensity of your runs, and ensuring that you're following what we call a progressive overload training protocol. So this is meaning that you're gradually making your runs harder, you're increasing the intensity over time to help you improve and to help the body get better. So say if you're running 3 days a week at the moment, here's a really, really good idea to sort of break those down to make sure that you're going through all the different types of running. You might find that you only notice a sort of slight different shift in your weight bearing when you're running faster versus when you're going slower. You might not notice it as much. So it's good to test out all these different areas of running, from kind of faster sprinting style to also that slower jogging, and even just walking as well, to see what effect that has. So if you're running 3 days a week, imagine these 3 days. 1 is going to be focusing on your distance and improving the distance of your runs. 1 of them is going to be increasing your speed and working on how fast you can go over a certain distance. And then that 3rd day is almost going to be a bit of a mixture of the 2. So it's going to be an interval type training so that you can work on a bit of everything for a kind of mid-distance length. So when you're working for your distance, obviously you're going to be working to pretty much run as far as you can. So as a beginner, this might look like just 2 or 3 kilometers at first. If you are a bit more advanced and you've been running a while, this might be 10 kilometers, 15, however far you're up to at the moment. And this distance is kind of about keeping a steady pace throughout that entire distance. See how far you can get, keeping a regular pace, regular rhythm in your running, see how that feels on your body. Now, day 2 is going to be this speed kind of training. So this is where we're going to potentially even half your distance run. We're going to take it down. We're going to go much shorter distance, but we're going to aim for speed. And again, we want to try and keep the same speed up throughout the entire distance of your run, but we're going to try and get that little bit faster. We're going to work different energy systems in the body, and this is really going to help you feel fitter in those long distance runs. And now this 3rd one that I mentioned is a bit of a mixture of the both. So this interval type training is something called fartlek training. It's something really simple to do, and for those of you who tend to get bored running long distances, it can really help with that as well. So you might, for example, come out of your house and you say, okay, I am going to jog to the end of my road. Once I get to the end of my road, there's a big tree in the distance. I'm going to sprint to that tree as fast as I can, and then I'm going to take it back to a walking pace until that lamppost. So you can use landmarks. It might be houses, street lights, post boxes, trees, anything along the roadside, and you're just going to pick random points in the distance of varying lengths and vary your speed throughout. So this is going to really just help with your recovery time when you're adding in those walks. It's going to help the body learn to recover between sort of more intense periods of running. It's also going to allow you to see how kind of your sprinting and your jogging maybe differ, as you might be doing them back to back, and you can kind of feel how your form perhaps changes between the 2 of them, and perhaps notice if one, for example, when you sprint, you might feel pain in your ankle or in your shin, whereas when you just jog, it's not there. So there's ways to kind of see how these differ and just improve all of those different areas of running for you. And then this can also help you to figure out if there's some areas you need to work on. And so again, when you are doing these runs, if you're finding that anything is bringing up any niggles, aches, pains, Dave is going to go through some of the typical injuries that you might be finding, and how you might overcome them, or why they might not be as simple as just resting.
Cool, thanks Phoebe. It's true, so training your systems different ways, it's going to show up, number one, what your natural cadence is, but also as you do start to change your cadence, you're starting to vary your stride length, you're starting to vary the energy you're putting through the systems, and it's a really good way of highlighting when there is a deficiency. So as you do go through that training, it is important to note, right, when was it feeling sore? What was I doing when it felt sore? Was it at the start of the run? Was it at the end of the run? Particularly thinking at the end of the run, as you get tired, those bad patterns you may have in your form will be enhanced. So you'll get tired, you'll get, your body will get a bit sluggish and lazy. Just maybe your foot's going to turn out a wee bit further. You're going to be slightly more asymmetrical in the way you're swinging the arms, or just maybe you start leaning further and further to one side to load one side differently to the other. Now, the typical things people always want to talk about when it comes to running and pains when they run revolve around three areas: all lower limb, ankle and Achilles, knee pains, and hips. So I'm going to start with the ankle and the Achilles. Number one is, if you have historically had a sprained ankle, you need to make sure that you have secured your trainers really well. Sprained ankles are the bane of a physio's life. They cause all sorts of problems, not least because the likelihood is you've got a slightly more wobbly ankle on the side that you sprain than the other side. If you sprain them both, you've got two wobbly ankles. They both need tightening up. But as you wobble more on one side than the other in particular, you have to work harder to control that leg. And that's particularly where we often see Achilles pains come in. So the Achilles is a short tendon that goes between the calf muscle into the heel, and it's a very strong tendon. It likes to be worked in a straight line. As you start to have more movement at the foot, you're putting different loads through that tube. So you may outload the outside, the inside of the tube more than you load straight through the middle. And that's often where you start to see pain starting in the Achilles. Pain starts normally as a bit of a niggle, often becomes really quite sharp indeed, and you often see a swelling within the tendon if it's getting really bad. If it is getting bad, it is getting swollen, you need to cut down what you're doing. The more you irritate that Achilles, the worse it's going to become. That is slightly different with the chronic Achilles, been going on for a long time, but that's a discussion for a different day. The way the Achilles works is also dependent on the rest of the chain. So if you're not controlling your hip very well, you're making your foot work harder, then you are going to make your Achilles work harder. Sadly, these injuries aren't as easy as just 1, 2, 3. I'd like to say we could do a runner's world answer today and basically say if you do these 3 things, you'll stop all Achilles pain. But it doesn't work that way. The body works as one entire unit. And that's why the 3 things I pointed out are really important. Working out how to make your feet land symmetrically and not have one leg turned out. Working out how to swing the arms symmetrically rather than having them asymmetrical, and how to weight bear the same on both sides when you run will diminish your chance of getting these pains. Knee pain tends to come in 3 forms. You get front knee pain or anterior knee pain around the kneecap, lateral knee pain or runner's knee as it tends to be known, or medial knee pain, pain on the inside of the knee, which is often related to a bit of wear and tear of the knee, sometimes a slight bit of meniscal damage. All 3 are dependent on how much the knee is having to rotate. The knee is a straight hinge in the body. It's designed that when you put your foot down and bend the leg, it goes in roughly a straight line. If you have rotational difficulties at other areas of the body, foot, ankle, even slightly higher up, you're going to put the foot down, move the hip, and ask the knee to rotate in between the 2. And it's these rotations that often cause maltrekking of the kneecap, which is where you get that frontal knee pain with the kneecap rubbing on the bone, the tendons on the side flicking over the knee, which is where you get your runner's knee, or turning and twisting in the knee, which then gives you that bit of wear and tear on the inside and can irritate the meniscus or the shock absorber that sits on the inside. So really, with a knee, yes, you want to get it stronger in certain patterns as per the direction of sort of recipe physiotherapy, but you have to look at what's happening elsewhere in the body in order to treat that properly. Otherwise, what you do is you strengthen the knee in a certain direction, but you'll keep it twisting, and over a period of time, it will continue to get painful and damaged. So the final part of that chain of the lower limb is the hip. And you tend to get 2 specific hip pains. You get a lateral hip pain, pain on the outside of the hip. That is a very difficult thing to diagnose. There are lots of things that can create pain in that area or refer pain to that area. But fundamentally, what's happening is the hip isn't being used in a very nice way. It's either being asked to rotate too much or it can't rotate enough. So you need to work out how much range of movement you've got available in those hips. If you get posterior hip pain, pain in your butt cheek, again, this is difficult because it can be coming from the hip itself, or it can be coming from the back and referred down through the nerves. So with all of these aches and pains, the difficulty is that they can come from a blockage in anywhere in that chain. So from a simplistic perspective, and we're going to try and keep things as simple as possible today. When you are at home and you are running, do have a look which foot turns out more than the other, if one does. When you are swinging your arms, which side is being asymmetrical? Can you feel it? And when you listen to when you're running, do you hear a deeper thump on the floor on one side than you do on the other? I'm going to give you 2 little tests just to try at home. I'm going to make it 3 actually. We've got the time. We're on lockdown. You might as well. First test is when you're standing, feet pointing straight ahead. Can you turn your toes so they turn to point each other? Can you get into a pigeon toe position? Is it easier on one side than the other? If it is easier on one side than the other, then one side likes to turn in more than the other side. Is this the same side that you found actually slightly turns out? And do you need to do some kind of stretching regimen around the hip in order to allow that movement to occur? Number 2, when you're sitting, if you hold your arms in front of you and you pull the arms straight backwards on one side, forwards on the other, and then the same on the opposite side, is there one side that moves easier than the other? So if there is one side that moves easier than the other, you're much happier moving the arms and shoulders on one side than the other, and you'd want to do some kind of mobility regimen around the shoulders and the upper body in order to that's easy for me to say, isn't it? In order to get equal movement on both sides. The third one is simple. Stand on one leg, swap over, stand on the other leg. Does it feel the same? If it doesn't feel the same, which one's the challenge coming on? And if the challenge is coming on, the one that when you're listening to yourself running, there's a thunk and a lighter thunk. If it comes with a thunk, it's probably because you don't like weight bearing on that side. And therefore, balance exercise around that side would be really useful. That is a very simplistic explanation of injuries and things to look at in order to help with them, help prevent them. But sadly, without being able to see people in clinic at the moment, that's the best we can do. We always have to do a video analysis to see what's happening with people if they are running. So if you do have a problem, please do get hold of us and we're happy to look at it. But from an overview perspective and integrated with training, making sure the body's got the right movement and training at speed says in the right way, that's the best way to try and prevent any of the injuries occurring.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, this next point as well is really going to help you if perhaps you haven't yet got any injuries and you would like to stay that way, and we all want to stay injury free, of course. One of those things that's going to really aid that is making sure that you're doing a proper warm up for your runs. Now, I know most of you listening have probably just rolled your eyes at the fact that I've said warm up before your runs. My run is my warm up, but there are so many things that's going to be important for, like David said, especially if you have one side that's maybe a bit tighter, it's not moving as well, is working on opening that up before you start running and working on activating the right muscles so that the right kind of activation patterns can be happening during your runs. So running for warm up, can't speak now, lost myself, but warm-ups for running should include a variety of things. One of those I would always recommend is dynamic stretching, and I will actually post as well, kind of alongside this video, a little example warm-up that you can use for your next run. Give it a try and see how it feels. So number 1 is going to be some dynamic stretching. This is going to involve getting the body moving. It's not just holding a static stretch and pulling your foot up behind you and reaching for your toes and then off you go. This is moving the body through some motions that it will be performing when it's running. It's getting the joints moving together so that we can get the body moving as best as we can. The second one is going to be activation. So certain muscles might need activating a little bit more that are going to help you with that run. So especially if you do tend to sit down a lot during the day, it might be getting those glutes activated a bit more because they might be a bit lazy and lengthened during the day. It's working on activating all those muscles in the foot, doing some balance exercises, doing some kind of hinge movements, getting the hips, the knee, the feet and everything activated and ready to perform kind of that landing movement and the mechanisms that are required for your run. And the third one is just going to be some sort of heart raising movement, getting the blood moving around the body a little bit quicker before you get going, as that can have really great effects on your run and just make it that little bit easier to get going in the first place. So as I said, I will post a little sample warm-up alongside this video. Do give it a try and obviously feedback whether it made your run better, harder, might even help you notice if one side is a bit stiffer and a bit tighter than the other, alongside those great tests that Dave gave us there. And yeah, that should help you out.
Cool. Phoebe, I think that's really important. What we're finding at the moment, people are working from home, we're in funny sort of desk setups and desk postures. It's important to think about you are what you do every day. So if we are sitting in some funky positions and maybe we're on a twist, the muscles get used to doing that. So if you then go from that position and go, right, I've got 30 minutes, I'm going to go for a run, your body's used to being in this position, and when you're running, it finds it hard to get back out of that position. So if we've been sitting at work, or we've just been homeschooling, looking after the children, perched at desks and trying our best to make sure everyone stays educated, to make sure that you do get moving before you go on the run, allows the joints to get into their ranges of movement. It frees up any areas that might have got stiff from sitting in those positions. It just diminishes that chance of picking up an injury straight out into the run. The second thing that you mentioned earlier is training those different systems, because you are more likely to get injured at the end of the run. As you fatigue, those naughty patterns that you maybe had got used to will come back. So the better you train those systems, the better you control those systems over a long period of time, the better off you are. Running's a really difficult area. So many people are doing it. It's not as simplistic as I've made out today, but the principles that we've both spelled out are ideal for everybody. You've got to train sensibly, you've got to build up your training, and you've got to think about your form and how you're actually doing it. If you're mindful of those three things when you run, you're in a better place not to get injured or to pick up niggles or aches or pains before they become a chronic problem. Because once you've been running and the pain gets worse and worse and worse, and you just run through it, the likelihood is at some point something's going to fail and something's not going to let you run for a period of time, and that's no good for anybody.
Yeah, I think on that, the best thing I can say is listen to your body. If you're feeling on a run that, you know, the knee's not quite right, the ankle's not quite right, the hips feeling a bit funky, then stop, see, you know, try these tests that Dave's shown you. If you're noticing something, then do just get in touch with a professional. It's the best thing you can do. Don't just push through it, because if you catch it straight away, it might be a, you know, little bit of recovery, a little bit of rehab, and you're back out on the road again. If you do obviously continue with it, it could get progressively worse. So best to get it checked as soon as possible. Of course, we are both available for advice on any injuries. Obviously, please do get in touch with Dave. And for myself, if you have noticed any kind of weaker areas, we can obviously do more specific home running training programs to strengthen up those weaker areas. So please do not hesitate to reach out or comment on this webinar.
Cool. Phoebe, thank you very much for inviting me along. It's been a pleasure speaking.
Thank you to you too, Dave, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay, stay safe.